Silence. Not a whisper or a footstep could be heard for a moment, before the howling screech roared across the battlefield, as dozens of missiles streamed into the sky, being thrown towards their intended, doomed targets. This is a sentence that could be used to describe a multitude of battlemechs, but from the inner sphere, there are few that could match the intensity and ferocity of the subject of this video. There are only a handful of competitors that can claim to launch as many missiles, and even fewer that can match its other attributes. When this hulking behemoth was built, surely the Lyran Commonwealth felt they'd achieved something grand. And they really had. Only the greatest of fools would shirk off the presence of one of these grand horrors in active combat. When the call comes for missiles, this monster answers. In this piece, we are going to examine Defiance Industries' perfect missile-launching colossus. A machine so powerful, it can level entire lances if left unchecked. The Salamander. Something that often gets misunderstood about the clan invasion era, about the Federated Commonwealth, was just how authority ended up being divided. While on paper, and in theory, the Federated Sons and Lyran Commonwealth put aside their differences and united into one prosperous realm, this was not exactly the truth. House Steiner and House Davion, outside of their overall leaders in the form of the Archon and the First Prince, very much had their own regional interests and nobility at heart. The Federated Commonwealth existed somewhere in between a military and economic pact and an actual newly realized amalgamated realm. The reason I bring this up is because in 3055, after the calamitous military encounters with the clans inside of the Lyran half of the Federated Commonwealth, most frequently against Clan Jade Falcon to be specific, but also Steel Viper and Wolf, Defiance Industries, on Hesperus, the most important single industrial world in the Inner Sphere outside of Terra, created a series of major responses to lessons learned from the campaign. Despite their partnership with House Davion, this was a Steiner economic and industrial effort. The NAIS, or New Avalon Institute for Science, often played a helping role with the Lyran half of this alliance, but didn't contribute nearly as much when it came to putting machines into the field, by having them walk, roll, or hover off the assembly lines. In fact, because the Steiners bore the brunt of the burden of the clan invasion, and yet still had to produce the most materials, all while fighting on their home territories, one might be able to see a problem just past the horizon already by this time. Regardless, their enemies, the clans, always had the edge in terms of advanced technologies, and in the space of long-range missiles, it was no different. In theory, the clans could deploy these systems in greater numbers than their inner sphere counterparts. These techno-barbarians' way of war, however, did not really fully utilize them, despite their superior equipment, and employed them typically in a more direct fashion. Thus, the Inner Sphere, mostly in the form of the Federated Commonwealth, Draconis Combine, and Comstar, during the clan invasion would discover that medium lasers, missiles of all types, Gauss rifles, and specialized melee weaponry were their great equalizers with their clan adversaries, when employed in economies of scale. Not because their own systems were superior, as all of them weighed much more or performed less adequately, but because they could be utilized in numbers which their opponents could only dream of, by less expensive machines to counter the storm of sophisticated weapons their clan peers could deploy. One of the most vital mechs to come from this was, in fact, the Lyran state-funded and assembled Salamander. This 80-ton monster was built using the most advanced technologies of the day, and it was done to fulfill a very simple purpose. In the case of this particular Titan, it was built to be the ultimate inner-sphere long-range missile delivery system. And it does, indeed, do that job magnificently. At the time of the Salamander's construction, only a handful of mechs really dared to put so many LRMs into one machine. And truthfully, these kinds of mechs were rarely deployed by the clans, nor were they deployed doctrinally in a way which would use their strengths correctly. But where did the idea of the Salamander come from? Well, its appearance was indeed a radical shift in development for the Commonwealth, which traditionally leaned more into designs like the Zeus. The Salamander doesn't really borrow much from clan designs. No, instead, despite its chassis truly being unique, it appears that the Salamander was born from the bitter rivalry between the Lyran Commonwealth and Free Worlds League, in that much of the mech's core designed features very much mirror, at the time, the latest generation of awesome Battlemech built by House Marik. The rivalry between the former Lyran Commonwealth and the Free Worlds League is one wrought with bitterness and contempt between both sides. Analogous to the rivalry between the Draconis Combine and Federated Sons, the Marik-Steiner feud is perhaps worse, in that they appear to not respect one another as warriors or as martial combatants, the way the Combine and the Federated Sons did. The first two succession wars, and even the Age of War before that, even resulted in a popular Marik saying, which has persisted for centuries. Never trust a Capellan, but shoot a Lyran on sight. This less than fruitful relationship, even during the clan invasions era, where the Federated Commonwealth was one of the League's biggest customers, meant that Defiance Industries and the Lyran government vehemently denied any relationship or inspiration for the Salamander in regards to the awesome. To the public, these organizations have repeatedly stated that the Salamander in no way took any inspiration from their counterparts in the Free Worlds League. The rumors around this never went away though, and the defense against them remained always the same throughout the mech's production and sale, even into the Dark Age and Ilclan era. The reality, of course, is clear for all to see. The Salamander is an LRM-infused awesome. Still, the reason for this lack of admittance, it can be assumed, is not just rooted in Defiance Industries attempting to keep its good name, as demonstrated by them saying, quote, they had creative integrity, unquote, and were insulted by the accusations of copying their hated rivals, like Eartech. As an aside, Irian Technologies, and the planet it is named for, are the main rivals of Hesperus in production and international competition. Irian, to give perspective, is consistently shown to be the third most important industrial center in the Inner Sphere, and it just so happens to be within the Free Worlds League. But the other reason they clearly wish to distance themselves from openly admitting they copied their corporate and state rivals is simple. Well, beyond wanting to keep their stock prices up, that is. The Salamander was primarily sold to the Federated Commonwealth, but really to the Lyran Alliance, or the Steiner half of the Federated Commonwealth. Despite the Awesome's great reputation, it most assuredly would have been a sour pill for their customers to be devouring a product from, or inspired by, enemies they deemed to be beneath them. It wasn't as though they copied the Summoner, or some advanced killing machine from beyond the edge of the periphery. They copied their long-standing, bitter rival, and one they hardly respected in the way the Davions and Caretans respected one another. It's bad PR to say you built a mech because you copied the scum of the earth, in other words. Hell, it's bad for morale, too. So officially and conveniently, What I'm saying is that the Salamander was an original concept that took no influence from outside of the Federated Commonwealth, and to say otherwise is a baseless and slanderous accusation. This video was not paid for by Defiance Industries or the Lyran State. Regardless, no matter where its origins may reside, this 80-ton missile monster would not have an easy outing when it was first built in 3055. In fact, it would start with a series of small problems. First, the complexity of the design hindered its original batch of the mechs for the Federated Commonwealth, reducing its first run to only 9 machines. All 9 Battlemechs would be placed on the border with Clan Jade Falcon, in what was one of the most dangerous potential war zones and cook-off points in the Inner Sphere. They would be tested in skirmishes, raids, and the Jade Falcon outburst of the late 3050s. These mechs were built for this kind of war, and when they were used doctrinally, they would be more than a problem for any battle line Omnimech, but being tested by such fire can leave more than just burns on battlemechs and pilots. After the finale of the clan invasion, with Operations Bulldog and Serpent, this weapon was meant to keep the Federated Commonwealth as a whole safe, but it would be turned, violently, onto the Davion half of the state, with the now Archon Catherine Steiner Davion's mad bid for power and control being at the heart of this. Machines built to trade blows and provide support against the most dangerous killers in history were even more capably matched against Inner Sphere battlemechs by contrast. This is the war the Salamander shined in the most, turning its devastating volleys of missiles on mechs that would have once proudly stood in the same hangars. The mech warriors of the Lyran Alliance murdered their former countrymen with these beasts from afar, where they proved to be a true game-changer on many battlefields. There's a sad truth of life, that often, the weapons of war built for security and safety can be used to harm or threaten those they were designed to safeguard, and the Salamander, sadly, is one of the best examples of this. But the mech's legacy would not end with the shameful destruction and degrading of the Inner Sphere during the Federated Commonwealth Civil War, or even the Blakest era. No, this mighty amphibian named machine would persist well past its introduction, and would become the Lyran's answer to their hated rival, the Free Worlds League's longbow. This trusted, brutal behemoth would continue to be operated, built, and distributed by the Lyran State and Defiance from the rise of the Republic into the Dark Ages. In fact, its last significant outing, unfortunately, is once more draped in the shame and infamy of the actions of the Lyran State. After the removal of the Steiner Davion line from the throne of the Archons on Tharkad, and with the installation of Adam Steiner and his line of the ruling family, things seem to have turned a corner for the state. This peace would only, sadly, survive Adam Steiner himself, as his daughter, Melissa Steiner II, embarked on one of the most ambitious campaigns in the Lyran Commonwealth's history. She would ally with Clan Wolf and invade the now fractured Free Worlds League, more specifically the duchies of Tamar and Abbey and the Marik Stewart Commonwealth, as well as many independent worlds. The Salamander would be one of the great long-range hammers brought into this war of aggression, born purely out of the ambition of the Archon and House Steiner itself. The war, however, would go from a triumph to a travesty for the Commonwealth, and would end with the functional collapse of the Lyran State. The League would rally and salvage the Duchy of Tamar and Abbey, while Clan Wolf acted against the Lyrans before their own betrayal could be fully realized. The LCAF would be decimated before Clan Jade Falcon on the other side of the Commonwealth turned its own vicious attentions towards the distracted and battle-worn state. Infighting broke out politically. The state went into near anarchy. A poor series of investments resulted in the state defaulting on its debts, and the pincer strike between Clan Jade Falcon and Wolf would see the now falling apart nation's capital assaulted. Archon Melissa Steiner II would be killed before the Commonwealth was given any reprieve. This ended the rule of almost unquestionably the worst Archon in the history of the Commonwealth. In all of this, the Salamander would be faced against every enemy, in the desperate fighting against the League's Operation Homecoming, trying to hold on to the gains the state had made against the League, but in vain. It would be there launching missiles into the striking formations of Clan Wolf, as they carved their empire out of the dying husk of the Steiner state. Once more against the talons of Clan Jade Falcon, this amphibian juggernaut would unleash its payloads over and over again, but it was never enough. After the reign of Melissa II, many believed that the entirety of what was the Lyran Commonwealth would become a thing of the past. The entire nation seemed to be unraveling, with regions breaking away, military units mutinying or defecting, and with its coffers empty and its status as a trustworthy debtor being broken by its default. All of the sacrifice over centuries was just bleeding away. The wars against the corrupt Free Worlds League, the brutal Draconis Combine, the heinous Jade Falcon, and the traitorous Federated Sons all seemed to be for nothing. This was the final chapter for the state, one which would be picked apart by its clan neighbors as it fell apart internally. But there would be a reprieve, a moment of clarity in the madness, with the Republic becoming the victim of Clan Jade Falcon and Wolf instead of House Steiner. It gave breathing room for the new Archon, Trillian Steiner Davion, to try to rally the remnants of the beleaguered and beaten successor state. As chaos exploded on her border with the implosion of the Clan Jade Falcon occupation zone, turning into the Hinterlands, and with the Wolf Empire becoming embroiled in a war on two fronts, against the Free Worlds League and Capellan Confederation, this is the moment for the Lyran Commonwealth to once more rise from the depths. From here, the mighty Salamander will stride forward, accompanied by the more dangerous and technologically sophisticated arsenal of weaponry the LCAF and remaining provinces of the Commonwealth can provide, and they will be used to crush all that stand before them. The hinterland microstates will face wave upon wave of missiles as they try to stand fast in the face of the onslaught that is to come. The Tamar Pact, the Alina Mercantile League, Vesper Marches, Malthus Confederation, Clan Hell's Horses, and the shattered remnants of Clan Jade Falcon, if they have not already, will soon come to understand what it is to fight a Battlemech that can launch enough long-range missiles to blot out the sun. Even Ark Royal, should it not come back into the fold, will be left to fight these assault missile machines, if they do not see reason. Of all of the advancements made by Defiance Industries during the 3050s, perhaps the Salamander is the most enduring of this legacy of innovation and warfare, only matched by perhaps one or two Battlemechs in its dedicated role. It has for almost 100 years acted as the hammer, wielded by the great fist of House Steiner to strike down their foes. Others, like the Atlas or Zeus, may be more recognized as being the tools which the fist most prefers. But in reality, the Salamander is one of the most dangerous pieces within its lethal inventories. For the states of the Hinterlands, unfortunately, they will not only have to face off against this monster, but the entirety of the LCAF. There can be but one victor over the Hinterlands. Steiner, more than any other state, must be that victor. Battlemechs like the Salamander, and the brave mech warriors who pilot these war machines, will be key in ensuring that that victory takes place. They will do so in the immortalized words of Lieutenant Colonel Orpheus Thomas, commander of the 24th Lyran Guards, on the eve of the 12th Battle of Hesperus during the Third Succession War. With courage, with sacrifice, and with blood and iron. Perhaps one of the greatest long-range support battlemechs ever constructed by the Inner Sphere. The 80-ton assault mech designated as the PPR-5S Salamander would be a true revolutionary use of Star League technologies within the Inner Sphere upon its arrival in 3055. Defiance Industries smartly saved weight with advanced components, but kept enough space on board to accommodate the massive amount of weaponry that would be required to put this devastating battlemech together. Heavily inspired by Irian and Technocron's awesome, the Salamander is to LRMs what the AWS-9M is to particle projection cannons. Beginning with its main chassis features, the PPR-5S comes with an endo-steel internal structure, saving 4 tons of weight on board, but at the expense of its critical spaces. After this, because of the age of its development, it has a standard gyro and cockpit. Also, because of the ammunition-derived nature of its weapon systems, the Salamander does not need to invest in cooling in any meaningful way, and has 10 standard double heat sinks on board, resulting in it reducing its heat load by 20 per turn. Provided the mech has not taken engine damage, or is not in an overly warm or hot environment, it is perfectly cooled to run and fire its 3 main offensive systems every turn, without any heat buildup, making it actually more impressive than the AWS-9M in this respect. Regarding its onboard electronic systems, this 80-ton monster comes equipped with the humble Tharhes HM10 communications package, as well as the Tharhes Ares 7 targeting and tracking system. Neither of these confers it any bonuses, and frankly the Salamander doesn't really need any, even in the advanced rules. The only quirk the mech has is the difficult to maintain flaw, due to issues regarding its left arm in construction and maintenance. Traditionally, heavy striking LRM batteries in the assault mech weight tier, both in the Succession Wars and even after, are considered to be particularly agile. Most will move 54 km per hour, such as the longbow in its most successful forms, or the Stalker series of battlemechs. Being based more on the AWS-9M, the PPR-5S borrows from this design and installs a heavier XL engine to ensure it can keep pace with battleline inner sphere formations. This makes it fantastically dangerous, because it won't be left behind by friendly heavier mechs. These friendly assets, who it is supporting, will in turn prevent it from being isolated and destroyed by its enemies outpositioning it. To make this happen, Defiance would equip the Salamander with an 11.5-ton Pitband 320 XL fusion engine. This very heavy power plant gives the Salamander the ability to run the upwards of 64 km per hour, or 6 movement points in the tabletop game. For what the Salamander brings to any battle, this is exceptional. It can deliver fire on demand, and it's quick enough to not be left behind by friendly forces. Better yet, it's fast enough to even reliably generate moderate defensive movement bonuses, meaning that it is a far cry from something that can't protect itself in some way. Able to tactically participate, and being able to show up when needed, makes the Salamander extraordinary in this realm for its general role on the battlefield. Advantages that heavy mechs like the Archer have over machines like the Longbow are not found here. The only drawback is that if the Salamander loses a side torso, because of its XL engine, it will be disabled. But this is a small price to pay for its massively enhanced usability and functionality as a result of having it. Trying to keep the Salamander protected is a major core point of the mech, despite it only having a few means of doing so. Unlike later eras, there were only a handful of defensive technologies available at the time of the original Salamander's production that saw widespread usage in battlemechs, so there was only so much that could be done to keep the PPR-5S guarded. Even with these limitations though, the Salamander is in fact well protected. First, let it be noted that its mobility offers it some meaningful protection in both positioning and defensive bonuses. Next, it invests in case systems for its ammunition stored on board inside of the side torsos. This will not prevent the mech from being knocked out, but will allow it to be more easily salvaged after a catastrophic explosion of its ammunition magazine. It will also more than likely keep the pilot on board alive as well, which is another definite boon. But the real thing that makes the Salamander heavily defended is just its abundance of plating. While it cannot fit ferrofibrous on board due to having its critical spaces more or less filled to the brim due to its endosteel, its XL engine, and its massive weaponry, its heavy usage of standard armor is by no means a downside. It has more than 15.5 tons of Glasgow Limited standard plating, giving it a total of 247 points of armor, more or less mirroring its Marik rival, the AWS 9M Awesome once more. This is an intensely thick steel hide, meaning only the most dedicated and heavy enemy fire will manage to get through it. This means yes, despite its XL engine, the Salamander is very hard to knock out. The Longbow, an incredibly famous assault mech missile boat, from long before the time of the Salamander, is renowned for bringing 50 LRMs to the field. The PPR-5S outdoes this, in a lighter frame, and brings an absolutely devastating set of 3 Doombud LRM-20 racks to the table, giving it a total of 60 LRMs to launch every single turn. Often, the trade-off for this kind of firepower is a very limited total of ammunition, but for this great amphibian, this is not the case, as it brings 18 rounds of fire per LRM launcher. Those 18 rounds on this scale, for most opponents, is a horrifying prospect to face. Worse for its enemies still, the Salamander has the ability to indirect fire these missiles too, meaning it can attack from outside of the line of sight, with the help of a spotter. Because it is superbly cooled and has an extremely high level of ammunition for these systems, the Salamander can take shots that other LRM mechs may shy away from in order to conserve ammunition. It doesn't take many turns of bombardments from this missile beast to degrade even the hardiest of enemy battlemechs, be they heavy or assault mechs in their origins. Fortifications and fixed positions are even more hopeless in the face of this fire. More horrifying yet, it can fire all of these launchers with no heat buildup as mentioned prior. These 3 launchers are the primary means of the Salamander to influence a battle, and they do just that, in a very impressive capacity. Anyone who attempts to shirk off this volume of LRMs as being irrelevant to their own battle plans when standing against it is beyond a fool. Now, because these are inner sphere LRMs, they do have a minimum range, but that is why the mech is deployed in formations. It is not meant to be operated independently. For backup though, it does have 2 Defiance B3M medium lasers, but if you brought an inner sphere missile boat, and hope it can handle itself in close as mentioned, you're a bigger fool than the opponent who ignores being showered in LRMs. The PPR-5S has to be a part of a team. It's a support mech, not a do-everything-perfectly mech. Still, during the 3050s, if someone needs missiles brought in to functionally annihilate an enemy unit, the best option for the inner sphere is the mighty Salamander. When introduced in 3055, the only mechs comparable to this monster were the Inner Sphere's venerable longbow and the Draconis Combine's Naginata. Neither of them, however, matched the raw missile payloads of the Salamander. This versatile, tactically quick, heavily armored support mech is one of the best ever constructed with Star League era technologies, only surpassed by the LGB-12C in later years, which moves much more slowly and only has 10 LRMs more than the Salamander. It is, in regards to inner sphere machines, the most devastating overall missile mech built in the 31st century. While it may lack Artemis IV, it more than makes up for that by simply having a near-endless stream of missiles to distribute into its enemies. It is, in all probability, one of the best military innovations and accomplishments of Defiance Industries in the 31st century. One can only imagine the frustration and horror many Clan, and later Federated Sons pilots faced, when the howls of missiles shrieked from the other side of the battlefield, before descending upon them like explosive rain. Pushing things to the extreme, what if you wanted an LRM boat to bring terrifying levels of firepower while also running as fast as a Charger or medium mech? The answer to this question was developed by none other than Defiance only 1 year after the arrival of the Salamander chassis, in the form of the PPR-5T. Now, many sacrifices had to be made to achieve this wonder of technology, but it did take place. First, to get the Salamander up to speed, and by that I mean to 86 km per hour, it has a 26.5-ton 400XL engine installed. To keep some space open for its weaponry, a tonnage sacrifice had to be made in terms of its armor, so its protection is dropped to 13.5 tons of plating, giving it 216 points of armor overall. By virtue of the mech being faster, however, it does in theory offer similar levels of protection all the same, kind of. But you've got a Salamander running at 86 km per hour now. What else needed to change? Well, the launchers are dropped from LRM-20s down to LRM-15s, but there are still 3 of them, letting it launch volleys of 45 missiles per turn, which is very effective. Each launcher has 16 rounds of fire, and all of that ammunition is protected by case. Small lasers replace its medium lasers, but few would really notice. The real strength of the 5T is very simple. It can keep up with striker formations, bringing about the terror of it launching a heavy mech or even assault mech level of missile support for lighter formations. This is an exceptional, though extremely expensive Battlemech in terms of its production cost due to its very large XL engine. All the same, it's one of the most effective, fast-moving LRM support mechs ever built. The Salamander's developers at the time really knew how to craft amazing machines. Someone at Defiance, in the 31st century, needs a raise. Sometimes you can't have nice things. It's not that the PPR-6S is not good, just to be clear. It's that it's built to be a more balanced machine. The entire point of the Salamander series is that they are there to provide a spectacular level of LRM's fire support. To do this, it sacrifices greatly in other respects. The 6S, however, a mech built in 3058, was assembled with the idea in mind that it would not always be possible. Its onboard systems are almost identical, save for its weaponry and the addition of 2 more double heatsinks. An LRM launcher is removed, more specifically the one in the left arm. The remaining LRMs are given Artemis 4 fire control systems, as well as a comical amount of ammunition, because the 6S has 24 rounds of fire per LRM launcher, which is massive. After this, it has an SRM-6 launcher with fire control system in place of where the LRM-20 launcher once was. Finally, it rounds everything out with 2 medium pulse lasers. This mech is by no means bad. It does a great job, and it can persist longer than a bad cold, as it has enough ammunition for multiple protracted battles if needed on a single deployment. The real problem is, if one had a 5S and just supported it more, you'd likely be better off. Still, if you can't keep it covered, or want a more balanced machine, the 6S Salamander will fill that niche without a problem. Do you ever get the feeling that someone is just missing the point? Well, when it comes to Salamanders, someone really did miss the point with the 3060's built PPR-6T, mirroring the original once more outside of its double heatsinks, which it brings up to 14, letting it cool 28 per turn. This Salamander's designers thought it needed lasers. It once more removes an LRM-20. The remaining launchers retain their 18 rounds of ammunition per system, but do not get an Artemis upgrade. It has 2 medium pulse lasers instead of its standard mediums. And then it has an inner sphere large pulse laser in the left arm. It's pretty mediocre. Deviating this far from the original results in it not really doing much better. And if the Salamander, a missile boat, is wading into the thick of fighting to use its pulse lasers, it's not really being a support mech anymore. This is one of the odder and less welcoming configurations of the Salamander in my view. It forgets what the mech is really meant to do. There are few circumstances where this would be preferable to the 5S, while engaging in its real role on the battlefield. In 3064, someone at Hess first discovered that they had a powerful Salamander, a fast Salamander, a mixed-range Salamander, and a kind of mediocre Salamander. But they didn't have a jumping Salamander. The PPR-7S is a fascinating model. It drops its armor by half a ton. It changes its engine from a 320 XL over to a 17-ton 320 light fusion engine. This power plant is closer to its Clan XL counterparts, but weighs more. It was an inner sphere attempt in the 31st century to gain durability while still saving weight, and it definitely does that. For keeping the mech cold, it has its standard heatsink package as well. To save on a bit more weight, its LRM-20s are dropped to LRM-15s, but these are once more upgraded with Artemis 4 fire control systems. Each launcher has 16 rounds of fire as well. Its medium lasers are then upgraded to ER medium lasers. Then of course, the mech is jump enabled. The PPR-7S is more durable due to its engine change, though it is slightly less gunned. Its Artemis 4 systems do help offset this slightly, however. The mech benefits greatly from being able to jump up to 120 meters every turn, letting it reposition, get out of trouble, seek shelter, or outposition its enemies. The 7S is a more than worthy addition to the Salamander lineup. It was a new century, the 32nd century to be more specific. In their offices, in 3111, the designers and executives at Defiance Industries needed a way to provide value to the Lyran state. For more money, of course. It's hard to justify selling the same mech over and over, year on year, especially when peace had broken out, largely for so long. The only problem was, they had every kind of Salamander they could reasonably sell. But new technologies meant they could have an even newer Salamander. Wouldn't that be cool? Oh, and it'll have a C3 boosted slave system, in a time where C3 was falling out of favor. But the latter point is neither here nor there. The mech they conceived was a PPR series machine that wasn't just meant to hit hard, but was meant to hit from very, very far away. Once more retaining most of the original internal systems, barring the addition of one double heatsink and an XL gyro, the PPR-7T exists to fire LRMs at the furthest distance possible, in the form of having two extended-range LRM-15s and an extended-range LRM-10. Extended-range missiles like these can hit targets all the way out to a mass of 38 hexes. This mech exists to sit as far back as possible and just lob LRMs every turn. Under 10 hexes, it is entirely helpless, but this is more of a siege weapon, or a precision artillery system, more so than a frontline battle mech. Once more, each launcher has 18 rounds of ammunition, but due to tonnage restrictions, no cases. Still, it's an interesting, perhaps worthwhile, almost artillery-launching battle mech, if you can keep the enemy away from it. Even more than any other Salamander, this mech is exposed in close. The Salamander is a battle mech that, in my view, revolutionized the long-range support role in the Inner Sphere, just as much as the Awesome did upon its introduction generations earlier. When deployed against clan forces, and employed doctrinally, the Salamander becomes the center of a bastion, delivering devastating blows on even the most advanced and powerful of rivals. To be an opponent of the same tech level is to be even more doomed. Unfortunately for the Federated Sons and later the Free Worlds League, they would discover this for themselves, as hell descended from the skies every battle this mech appeared in. None are safe from this monster in a combat zone, and to defeat a formation that it resides in requires cunning and skill. This single mech in its opening debut made a venerable market leader like the longbow almost irrelevant on a mech-for-mech basis. Even when its rivals in the league responded with a multitude of new configurations of the longbow, using advanced technologies themselves, few truly lined up with the Salamander, as they would sacrifice mobility for meager upgrades and firepower by comparison. The PPR series, for its size, class, and role, are the perfect balance of firepower, armor, and mobility. Each configuration is fast and mobile enough to not be left out in the cold. or to be left behind by allies. Its armored plating is consistently thick enough to guard it from all but the most lethal of attacks. When it comes to firepower, its missile launchers are the things of nightmares for the enemies of House Steiner. The only true weakness this Colossus has is that the loss of a single side torso will spell its doom in most cases, but frankly, it is well worth the trade-off for such an incredible machine. In its initial run, the Salamander was unchallenged in the inner sphere. Over the decades, and even a century later, perhaps one configuration of the longbow has come to truly equal it in some sense, as well as the short-lived newcomer, the Viking, and even these mechs are flawed in their own ways. Even now, in the Ilclan era, when House Steiner seems to be teetering on collapse, one would be a fool to underestimate the Lyran Commonwealth armed forces when they bring this titan into a war zone. When Clan Hell's horses, or the Hinterland states, and their ambitions come into contact with the Salamander, they will quickly find that the Lyran state is far less dead than it appears. Mechs like this are its last line of defense and attack in the deadly game it now finds itself in. In the test of war, the Salamander has never and will never be found wanting. I am neither humble nor courteous, and so will not couch my intent with flowery or eloquent phrases. Instead, hear me plain. I will kill anyone who challenges my claim to the Archonship, and I will torture anyone who supports any of my rivals for the throne. I hope I've made myself understood. A quote from Archon Claudius Steiner, the Cruel. Thank you all for joining me here today. I hope everyone enjoyed a bit of a walk down the existence of the Salamander's profile. I decided to expand on this a bit, just because of how it was described in TRO 3055 Upgrade, as being used against House Davion. So it only made sense to just expand on its role in the AFFC and later the LAAF and LCAF. It really is the ultimate missile boat, I really mean it. The only mechs that do it better are built around clan tech. The Viking and the longbow are great, but they are slow, remember that. The Vikings and the longbows built by other states are great mechs, but when they match the firepower of the Salamander, they do not match its speed. To get back on subject, it was also really nice for me to delve into a machine that I have loved since I was a kid. First TRO I ever personally owned was 3055. And I always thought the Salamander was an incredible battlemech. Heat neutral while using its primary weapons, fast, heavily gunned, it's just insanely good. All of its enemies cower when they hear those missiles shriek. But outside of my fascination with this ferocious destroyer, if you liked this video, please remember to hit the like button. If you're new here, why not smash the subscribe button, the way the Lyran Commonwealth is going to smash the Hinterlands. I'm constantly making Battletech related content, and so there is more than enough for you to enjoy. To all of the YouTube channel members, you have my sincerest thanks for your support. I say this every time and I mean it, but this content is really only made possible because of viewers like you. But what do you all think of the mighty Salamander? Do you agree with my views on this wonderful amphibian? Or do you have a different take? Let me know in the comments section below, and I will catch you all there.